Great. Thanks so much, Melissa and Dean. We really appreciate the information that you shared and some of the ideas. We have some questions, and I'm just going to start working through some of the questions that have been asked and that we have here on the sidelines. And while that's happening, you'll notice that on the PowerPoint, there's also some resources for further information, further learnings. When this is posted on the NBA Cares webpage, those resources will also be there for you. This PowerPoint will be there. So one of the questions that came up, Melissa and Dean, is should someone become a mentor to the family and the inmate, or should the family and the inmate have a different mentor? So should the person that's incarcerated, is it possible to be the mentor to the person who's incarcerated and the family of that person, or are these two different roles best done by two different people or two different
groups? Question. Yeah, it's a really good question, and my experience with that, because we work with mentoring groups and train folks to be mentors, primarily working with returning citizens, and our approach is that the best approach is to have that separated. And part of that is because the issues are very different, and for the person who's a returning citizen, it's very important for them to have a nurture, support, and accountability group. That's what we call them. That is working with them solely, and is a place where they can talk about some of their family issues that they may not be able to feel comfortable talking about with their family or with their family present. And saying that, it's also important for the family to have that support as well. We don't offer a mentoring program for families, but there are several. Most communities, there are several in our community that have support groups for families with incarcerated individuals. And in that context, people who are working through these issues find it very beneficial to share some of the concerns that they have, because they can relate to one another very well. At some point, it's important to bring those two groups together, but it takes a while for that transition for the individual to come back into the community. And so my recommendation, Melissa may have a different recommendation, but my recommendation is that there needs to be two separate support groups initially, and eventually as things move forward and things get to be more positive, that those groups can begin to have some more interactions together.
Yeah, I'm a big person. I'm a big believer in boundaries, right? And so you put one person mentoring the entire group, like they're just going to become a liaison, and I think that would be, I'm with Dean on this. Something I should say, I work at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so I'll plug Big Brothers Big Sisters. What we do is we provide one-to-one mentoring relationships for children. And so some of our agencies were across the country. Some just serve kids 7 to 12. We in Kentucky are 7 to 16. And a significant amount of the kids in our program do have an incarcerated loved one. And so that's a one-to-one mentoring relationship designed for an adult to mentor a child. And so that way they get their own one-on-one attention. They receive their own mentoring. And sure, that person's going to potentially have contact with the parent that's not incarcerated, maybe even the one who is, but that's designed specifically for that kid. And we have like all sorts of numbers on positive outcomes in that regard. But that's something to consider, is maybe connecting your church with a Big Brothers Big Sisters or another mentoring organization just for the children, because they have their own impacts.
Thanks, Dean and Melissa. Another question that's come up is, what about when we have victims of crimes who are members of our church communities, our congregations? How do we be sensitive to them and the members of their families, while at the same time really providing care for the families of those who are incarcerated and caring for returning citizens? How do we do both at the same time? What are some of the things to be aware of? What's that look like in your experience?
It's another good question, and one of the things that we want to emphasize is that all oftentimes when you talk about these issues, it seems that we're not sensitive to the victims of crime. But there are also a number of people in our congregations who've been the victims of some serious criminal offenses, and the trauma that results from that is something that we need to be sensitive to as well. So congregations need to be very aware of some of the issues that are present with individuals who may have been crime victims, and not overemphasize the need to work with people who are coming out of prison and ignore them. I think that there is a place in our congregations for both and types of ministry. And the restorative justice program is a really wonderful way of bringing people together who have been victims and who are the perpetrators of particular crimes, and to facilitate conversations so that there can be a sense of understanding about where these folks are coming from, and a way of developing conversations so that victims can have a voice and talk about what are some of the effects that they have experienced as a result of the crime that's been perpetrated against them. And a lot of our folks who have been incarcerated have never even confronted anybody that's been a victim of a crime. And so my experience is that once they begin sitting down face to face with somebody who's been a victim, the understanding, the sense of the need for forgiveness, the possibility for reconciliation becomes much greater. But our pastors and our church members need to be very sensitive when they begin advocating for people who are incarcerated, not to forget the people who are victims.
Thanks, Dean. I have one more question, Melissa, maybe for you or Dean, if you have some information. I think we have time for one more. Are there programs that are specifically designed to work with children of incarcerated family members? Are there particular curriculums? Are there camp experiences or day programs? Are they around? And then how do we find out about them?
Like, really, no. So some people consider like children of incarcerated loved ones like an invisible group of children, because there's very little programming or resources available specifically just for them. There's grants, like there's some grants like our federal government provided them, then they cut them, and then we kind of have some again. But there's grants that provide funding for different social services organizations. But there's not just one that's like, hey, we are for this. So that's a great question, and I hate to say there's not a whole lot of resources just specifically for that. As far as curriculum, one of the things that I think is really beneficial, and it's going to sound kind of like juvenile, is go to sesamestreet.org. So Sesame Street creates curriculum for to help kids deal with different difficult things in life, divorce, bullying, and incarceration. And so if you go to the Sesame Street website, this is just a go-to that I always recommend. Go to the Sesame Street website, go to their incarceration page. They have resources for parents on how to talk to children, resources for kids, like videos of Sesame Street characters talking about their parent being incarcerated. And so that's a great resource for anybody. Church, parent, even a kid. Those art activities I do in the lobby of the jail, we show the videos and we allow the kids to talk about them and write letters to their loved ones. So that is my first go-to resource I recommend. There's research out there, but there's not a whole lot of resources.
I'll just add a little bit to that, Melissa. You may be familiar with this. But there are some programs that actually have some camping opportunities for children of who have incarcerated family members. And I know that the Episcopal Church has funded a program where they have day camps for children who have incarcerated parents. So if it's something you might be interested in your congregation, begin checking around, because I think you'll find little pockets of places where people are attending to that particular population of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks, Melissa and Dean. We really appreciate that. And this ends today's webinar. We thank you for your time and your interest in this topic. We do really encourage you to think about the ways that your congregation can be involved in this kind of ministry, in caring for those who are incarcerated, and especially in caring for their families and their loved ones. This is an important ministry of the church, and it's one where there is room to do better, to grow, to pay more close attention, and to provide this essential kind of care. We really want to thank you, Dean Bucalis and Melissa Hutchins, for bringing the kind of years of experience that you bring to this topic, for hands-on engagement, and for hearts that help challenge us in the way that we might be focused and the kind of work that we can do. So we're really grateful for that. I just want to make a note before we go about this summer's General Assembly for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. If you're planning on going to the General Assembly this year in Indianapolis, we invite you to stop by the NBA booth and see the kinds of activities that we're engaged in, that our partners are engaged in across the church, especially as it relates to prison and jail ministries. There are two things I'd like to just specifically encourage you around. On Saturday, at the beginning of the General Assembly, there will be a rally for family justice at the Indiana State Capitol. That's on July 8th from 3 to 5 o'clock Eastern Time. There's lots more information about that on our webpage and on the Christian Church Disciples of Christ webpage. The second thing that I would encourage you to take a look at General Assembly, come by the NBA booth and experience the solitary confinement, the virtual experience of a solitary confinement cell that we'll have there throughout the assembly. We've been working with a variety of partners to do advocacy work on ending solitary confinement, and this is part of that advocacy work that we're hosting that solitary confinement cell with a number of partners there. So we really encourage you to stop by the booth and experience that and engage in conversation about your work and about the work of the church in this area. Again, feel free to go to nbacares.org for all kinds of information about the Prison and Jail Initiative, and you will be able to, from there, contact Dean or Monica and watch for this webinar to be posted live on our webpage. Thank you again. We appreciate you being part of this webinar today and look forward to the next in our series of webinars.
Bye.